happy to be here with all of you. I'm Linda Bloom. This is my main squeeze over here, Charlie Bloom. On Wednesday, September 21st, we celebrated 48 years together. Well, we're getting old.
Really?
Yeah.
I must have lost track somewhere along the line.
It's a long time. So when we met, I had just turned 22. I'm looking out at the group here and I'm seeing
Now
that,
they know how old you are.
yeah, I'm old. And it's okay to get old as long as you keep learning and you keep your spirit vigorous. I'm okay with my aging. It's confrontive, but I'm still learning things, and there's a lot to learn about relationship. And when I first met Charlie, I'm the older woman by 6 months, and I was 22. I'm looking out here, I'm seeing that you are in that age range. He was 21 and I was 22, and we didn't have all the advantages like having juicy courses like this to help us have a good start. So we had to piece together the little bit that I knew and the little bit that he knew, and we were lucky to get some good teachers along the way. And we want to channel through some of the essence of the teachings about what good relationships are made of. So I've made my career out of assisting people by passing on some of the practical wisdom that I've gotten from some other people. Some of it peers, do you know, friends? Some of it teachers, some of it spiritual teachers, and some of it just people that I have learned from in my classes. We've been teaching for probably three decades now. And we're both therapists, so we see individuals and couples, and we've learned a lot from the people that we do counseling with. Plus, we did this piece of research that's an anecdotal study, not one of these, with a control group. But the second book, after 101 Things I Wish I Knew When I Got Married, we interviewed 50 really happy couples and let them tell us in their own words their secrets of success. So that was book number 2. The one that came out this year in April is called Happily Ever After and 39 Other Myths About Love. And that's busting up some myths that people have. So one of the things that I would like to do right in the beginning is bust the myth about couples who have been together for a really long time, like Alana and Joe and Charlie and Linda here, that it gets stale and boring and predictable and yucky over time. That does not have to be the case. And I had some fear about it when I was in your age group. And so it can keep getting better. The love can keep getting deeper. The tolerance and the allowing and the surrender and the spaciousness in the relationship for people's kinky little things. Everybody's got some stuff that annoys you, that you can get okay, really okay, not just forcing yourself to overlook, but really see the beauty, the dazzling beauty in the other person as you take ownership of it in yourself. And so if any of you have concerns about that, about a relationship getting stale and boring over time, and you have aversion to committed partnership because you think, oh, that sounds like it's going to just get flat, I want to see if I can offer myself up. I get a big kick out of being a model for a lot of couples. Do you know? Of having a vibrant relationship over time, a living relationship over time. And another thing that I had concern about when I was in your age group is that sex would get predictable and flat and stale and boring. It was hard for me to vision and imagine that it could stay juicy and hot over time. So I'm here to testify that that's possible. You need to know yourself. You need to have good communication and keep yourself vibrant and alive, and then your relationships will be vibrant and alive. If you get stodgy and complacent, and you put your life on cruise control and you're not on your growing edge, then that's going to manifest in your relationships. But if you make a commitment, as I did when I was in your age group, to living a very full life, really grabbing life by the ass. Do you know that you really want to get the most that you can while you're in this body? And we're blessed to live here in these times. I sometimes think I could have been born in the Middle East and living under a burqa where they put you in a big bag because they think that the body's dangerous and the human form can't be exhibited. So I have a lot of gratitude to be in the United States, to be in California, which is a more liberal area of the country, and that there are classes like this that keep people awake to the joy of sex, also the dangers. We just had a little presentation here about not enough people are talking about STDs and asking their partners. They're bashful to ask. It's awkward, and uncomfortable. But with this incredible blessing of living in this time of freedom and experimentation also comes this responsibility to not cause harm with our sexuality to ourselves or to other. And you're in that age group that you're high risk because you have this feeling of invincibility and that it's going to maybe happen to somebody else but not happen to me. So I always think when these classes are emphasizing, the elders that are a little bit farther along the growth path, that they want to take the young students and shake them and say, be careful, there's some danger out there. Be careful with your sexuality. I'm also feeling that motherly protectiveness that I want to shake you. Speak up, talk. Don't be bashful and don't think it can't happen to you. And at the same time, I don't want you to just have such scary associations with sexuality that you tense up, because I want you to really enjoy that aspect of your life. It's one of nature's best things that they give us, I think, if we use it wisely. So there's also one thing that I wanted to say early on. In a group this size, there are going to be some people who've already had some difficult sexual experiences. Sometimes in childhood, somebody mishandled you. Sometimes it could be somebody in your own family who you're supposed to trust to protect you, who may have molested you. Sometimes people have had, date situations where somebody's been rough with them. It's not just the women. Sometimes the guys have had difficult situations too. And I think that people often get closeted about those experiences and don't want to talk about them, that they're so painful and there can be shame associated with them. And I'm a communication advocate. I want people to come out of the closet and to speak about if they've had difficult experiences with a close friend, with a confidant, or maybe get a professional counselor to talk to. And the point that I want to make is, in my long career, I've worked with a whole lot of people who have had unfortunate, regrettable sexual experiences. Sometimes they were the perpetrator of it, but sometimes they were the victim of it. And I just want to assure you that if you are one of those people who has had a regrettable experience, it doesn't have to hamper your well-being in your life. It's completely healable. It may take a while. You may have to go through some uncomfortable feelings while you're, sort of reliving the experience and find a way to frame it and to forgive yourself and the other person. It can be a piece of work. It can even take years. but I don't want you to have any limiting belief. It's a myth to believe that you're damaged in a permanent way. Even those difficult experiences that we go through, no matter what they are, those can be the very ones that those weak spots become our greatest strengths. The places where the wounds are can become our gift, that we can become more compassionate and understanding out of the difficulties in our life, no matter what they've been. So I'm going to let you hear a bit from my honey here, my sidekick.
My turn.
Yeah.
Okay. How you guys doing? Good. Good. Well, me too. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting us. I want to say a little bit about what our presentation is going to involve and how you can get the most out of it. First, guideline. There's no rules here, but there are certain guidelines that might facilitate your maximizing the value here for you. The first one is to show up. Right? What does that mean? I mean, like, wouldn't somebody say, okay, well, we've already done that. Everybody's showing up here, right? Is that true? What do you think? The second rule, by the way, is to participate. Just giving you a little heads up on that. So if you were to participate and respond to that question, that would require you to take a what?
A risk.
The R word. The R word, a risk. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but in life, usually between you and what you really want but haven't yet experienced or achieved is risk. Anybody ever notice that? Mm-hmm. That there is sometimes, you're looking, boy, I would really love to have that experience, or I'd love to, be with that person, or I would love to get that, or I'd love to have that, do that experience. And often there's a risk involved. And what I found is that there's always some risk or risks between me and what I really want to experience. So I want to invite you and challenge you today, in the time that we've got today, to risk. Not just by speaking out when the opportunity is offered, but to risk really being here, to risk taking in and listening and focusing and paying attention and looking within yourself, checking out some of the things we're going to be saying. Because we're not going to be telling you the truth about relationships and sex. We're going to be telling you some of the things, sharing some of the things that we have learned over the decades that we've been around on the planet and with each other. Like in the book that you're reading, 101 Things, that's just about things that we've learned. We're not saying that this is what you need to do, or this is the truth, or this is correct. Anything other than this is wrong. We're just saying, hey, we've observed this. We've made these mistakes. We've done these things, and we've learned what the consequences are, and we've learned not to do certain things again, and to do more of certain other things that work better. And that all took the willingness to risk. So I want to challenge you to risk. So if you were to accept that challenge and respond to my question, what does it mean to really show up? What might you say? Please.
Be present and engaging.
Be present and engaging. That is really the essence of what showing up means. Because you can bring your body someplace, but if you're not present, if your mind is out there somewhere, and how many of you have noticed that even in the short time we've been together so far today, that there have been times when your mind has sort of drifted onto other subjects and you haven't been paying total attention. That happens. It's going to happen. Don't make yourself wrong for it. It's being present is something that we experience 24/7. We're present, and then we drift off, and then hopefully we're present enough to notice that we're not present anymore. And then we can make a choice about, well, I can continue to daydream, or I can come on back. So to be present and engaged with your own experience, engaged, connected, that's what engaged is. And then connected to other people's, what they've got to say too. You're going to be hearing from us, you're going to be hearing from other people in the room. They will maybe be hearing from you too. It's okay if you don't talk today. Some of you are going to leave this room without having said a word. That's okay. But if you're present and you're engaged, you're going to get more value, even if you don't talk, than somebody who has perhaps done a lot of talking, but they haven't been particularly engaged a lot of the time. So it's not about what you do or say, it's about how present you are, how awake you are. Whether you're really here, being attentive, engaged, connected, participating through listening or speaking, or whether you're just sort of giving yourself permission to kind of check out. Okay? Anybody else want to say anything else about showing up?
There was another hand.
Yeah, I was going to say the same
Yeah,
thing.
same thing. Okay, good. Okay, excellent. So, we're going to be saying, like I said earlier, we're going to be sharing some of the things that we have learned over the years and decades. It's not the truth with a capital T. It's our experience for you, to offer to you to see what some of the possibilities are, what some of the things that might be helpful for you to consider. We have a sheet that we're going to be giving to you a little bit later that has some key points specifically about sexuality. But today, we are not going to limit the focus of what we talk about to sexuality. We're going to include it, but the second part of what we're going to be presenting here today is going to be an opportunity for you guys to ask questions to us that can have to do with any aspect of relationships at all. And we've done this for these guys, with these guys, a number of times over the last few years. And I love doing it. It's really fun. Because most of the time the people that I work with are not young and vibrant, but they're people who have, they've paid some dues and they've been around a few times, and they're not as open and engaged because they're more focused on problems that they're bringing in because of mistakes that they've been making, and they need help getting over some of their problems. But when we come here, it's like Linda said, most of you guys are around the same age that we were when we met, almost 50 years ago. And it's good to be with people who have that kind of openness and curiosity and who are at the beginning of this path. So when we've spoken here before, one of the parts that I have most enjoyed and that it seems like the students have most enjoyed is the part where we get to respond to questions that you have. And it can be very generic, general questions like that have to do with aspects of relationships or sexuality that affect people in general, or it could be something very specific to a concern that you have yourself. So you may have questions while we're talking, but save them until after the break, which is probably when we'll get a chance to respond to them. Okay? All right. So first thing that I think we'll do is we'll just jump right into some of these key points about sexuality, and we're gonna alternate, going back and forth and sharing them with you.
Now, I feel confident that a lot of people here already have really positive associations with sexuality, that it feels good, and you have that association in your mind from feeling good, but you might not appreciate some of the subtle benefits that come with really good quality sex. That you get heart health because it's a cardiovascular workout. That you get an endorphin and oxytocin rush in your body. Your brain pours this into your bloodstream just with touching, just with hugging, just with eye contact. When you get more sexually aroused, you get a higher dose. When you have an orgasm, you get a big blast. And that's one of the reasons that you get afterglow after sex. And so when people are bathed in this, the medical experimenters call it the love cocktail. It's such good live messages to your body that you get a health benefit and a longevity benefit. And this guy, Roizen, who's at the University of Chicago, interviews these people late in life and gives a sexual inventory to them for how frequently they have sex. And the old folks who are still having sex twice a week get an average of 2 years extra life. There are other research that came out of the University of Belfast in Northern Ireland. This was only done with men. But when they were sexually active late into life, they got an even more longevity. I think they got 5 extra years. So there are reasons to work out our well-being in our sexual relationship that aren't just psychological, emotional, that you really get health and longevity benefits. One of the other things is that it's an anesthetic. So if you have pain in your body, you guys don't have to worry too much about, but when you get to be older, you get aches and pains and this and that. But sometimes even young people, they suffer from headaches and they've got sports injuries. And when you're sexually aroused, you might not have the entire pain taken away, but it is an anesthetic so that you have a little less, like for menstrual cramps. And it's an analgesic in addition to being an anesthetic. So an analgesic means that you're forgetting. You know, you're so involved in the sexual experience that if they irritate you, you forget for a little while you're mad at them. Do you know? So an amnesic and an analgesic. Plus which is just a really nice way to show love to somebody. If you feel fond of them and you care for them and you have an agreement that you'll be sexual, it's a way to bring them treats and get them high, and a way for them to bring you treats and for you to get high. And that has a long-lasting effect because you get this self-esteem and self-confidence and feelings of personal power. So these are all the sex-positive associations. There are more than these, but this is a starter kit. The second thing that sometimes people are not real clear about, that I always feel it's important, is that there are different kinds of sex. And so when we teach, we put them in 5 categories. So the first category are known as the quickies. We call those the junk food sex. But I don't mean to put it down. It's got its place. I really like Cracker Jacks and Mars bars and potato chips. I just wouldn't want to make a special, diet of it. But it has its place. Just go for it and have quickies. The second kind of sex we refer to as meat and potatoes. And if that's offensive to you and you're a vegetarian, you can call it the tofu and sprouts, but that's the main fare. Do you know that's like the standard? And what you fall back on, the positions that you fall back on, it's usually in bed. It's not, it's nothing out of the ordinary. And meat and potatoes and tofu and sprouts is great. And that's usually the kind of sex that most people have. But if you want to be more on the adventuresome edge, and keep it really alive, then the next kind, we call that the hot chili peppers. And that's a little edgy. And I know some people here are into polyamory where they have more than just one sexual partner. That would be in the edgy kind, the adventuresome. Some people here are varying the place where they have sex. You might be outdoors in a wooded path, you might be in your backyard if there's some privacy in your yard. And the things that you would be doing would be experimental. A very small percentage of people even go to the sex stores and get toys. Well, it's only 15% of the population. I think that's growing, and I think that's a good thing. But the people who are experimenting with the toys and who are coming out of the closet with their fantasies and role-playing, maybe dressing up, those are the edgy. That would be the hot chili peppers. This is my favorite kind. We call this gourmet dining. This is taking a long time. This is the soup to nuts. This is, for special occasions, birthday, wedding anniversary, or you could make any day really special. It's got all of the trimmings. So you really have to go public with your prayer and you tell your lover, and maybe you do a whole hour massage for one of you and another whole hour massage. Maybe you don't do a whole hour. Maybe you just do a head massage or you massage their feet. But do you know that you've got the extras? Maybe you've got the love poems and the music and the scented candles. You get the picture? Do you know that you make it really a special occasion? Thanksgiving, celebratory. Last but not least, we refer to as ambrosia, and ambrosia is the nectar and the food for the gods and goddesses. And that would be tantric sex, and I think you must have talked to the class a little bit about that. It is really worth studying tantric sexuality. This is when the religions, all the major religions, really put the kibosh on sexuality, as if the body was base and the spirit was the exalted part, that there was always a group of people that were kind of hidden, but they didn't buy it. And they say, I can go to God just as well with my body, and I'm not going to buy this party line about it's less spiritual. And so they were using their sexual experience as a holy practice. And so there's lots of tantric practices with, singing together and chanting together and different postures and soul gazing and these wonderful tantric practices that are worth adding to your repertoire over time. So on your own, at some point, you might just want to have some inner looking about what your favorite kind of sex is, and to be willing to share that with your lovers, because they can't read your mind and they don't know what your favorites are unless you really, come out and take a risk and explain to them what it is that lights you up. I think it's sad that the research shows that most people have these very full-blown fantasy and don't ever share it with their partner. When they finally do come out of the closet about it and share it with their partner, sometimes their partner says, that sounds delicious, let's try it. And they've been holding back for a long time for fear that they would get judged or somebody would say, "You're really weird," do you know? And that they finally mention it. It's risky, but sometimes the partner's game, and then they'll come forward with some of their fantasy life too. So just some thoughts for you to consider.
Be aware of what turns you on and communicate that to your partner. Tell the truth about what isn't working in a respectful way. I'm a man of fewer words than you may have noticed that.
Is that all you want to say?
Well, unless you want to add anything.
I want to add something.
I thought you were
So I think that this is really like bottom line and core. And the research shows that when you interview women about the ideal sexual experience, and then you interview them about what actually happens in bed, and they interview the male partners of these women about their ideal experience and what actually happens in bed, what do you think has the closest resemblance, the vision and the actual? Would you think the guys are having their vision come through, or you think the women are having their vision come through? Not the women. She's saying it's the guys. Now, the guys think the women are really sexually happy with them because the women aren't speaking up and say, it's a little too much pressure there, I like it lighter there, I like it stronger there, and I like to take more time at the foreplay. And so I just think that when the women find their voice and find their leadership and really tell the men what they want, it's risky, yes, it's risky. But they interview those very same guys, and they say, if only one of you can have the mind-blowing orgasm, do you want it for yourself or do you want her to have it? By and large, the guys say they want the women to have it. So I don't think we should waste the opportunity. There's a lot of generosity of spirit with these guys if the women just find their power and speak up and ask for what they want. You'll be having a whole lot more fun in the bed.
right.
That's right. So we already talked about this one a little bit, about being present and focusing your attention. And it's very important to discipline the mind to have focused attention for all the things we do. But one of the reasons is that you get so much more sexual pleasure when you're really there. Sometimes what we say is, like the sign in the Las Vegas casino, you have to be present to win. Do you get it? You have to really be present if you want to win big. And so that focused attention in the sexual experience and other things too, and not to get too focused on genitals. Do you know? Full body, the whole body.
Which one? This one?
Yeah.
Just did this one.
Okay, well, they go together.
Okay, make your sexual relationship a high priority and give it the attention and energy it needs in order to thrive. Yeah, make it important. Notice the things that are important to you in your life, you tend to spend more time with those things, you tend to give it more attention, and that strengthens it, that reinforces it, that brings out more of that experience into your life. So, yeah, pay attention.
The only thing I would add to that is the Masters and Johnson and the Kinseys, they've been doing research since way back in the 50s. This is a very sad finding. In the 1950s, people were having more sex then and enjoying it more than now. So there are different theories about it, but I'm pretty sure it's because people are working so hard. People have never worked so many hours as they work in the United States, and there isn't any place in the world where they work so many hours. And I think people are just tired, and so they're not making their sexual experience a high enough priority. So don't get so caught up in your commitment to your career or even your academics that you neglect that sweet part of your life. You're going to do that one?
Okay, this is what we call the big cure. You may not have ever heard of this, but there used to be these things called pens that people would write with before there were phones and computers and laptops and things. And so when they had an appointment, they would go to something called a calendar, which was actually made out of paper. It wasn't on a screen. I know your grandparents may have, could explain to you what that was like. But so we call this the Bic Cure because some of those pens were called Bic pens. And when you write down on your calendar a commitment or an appointment or a date that you have that's important to you, then you're going to keep that. You're going to honor that commitment, more likely anyway. And so we often, when we're dealing with people who say, you know, I just don't have any time, you know, like I got the kids and I'm busy working all day, and you know, by the time I come home, I'm, you know, so we don't, you know, we just kind of collapse at the end of the day. We don't have time for that. I don't have the energy. So what we often propose to people is, well, then make time.
Mm-hmm.
And although I've heard a huge range of excuses as to why people can't find the time, I have never once encountered a situation in which a person was literally unable to create the space in their life. They might have to juggle some things a little bit. They might have to move some other commitments. They might have to open up some space where they hadn't considered. But it's always possible. When something is important enough, you make time for it. Have you noticed that? You make time for it. Now, if you haven't been having a particularly satisfying experience with somebody because there's frustration or there's undealt with grievances in there, then you're not going to be particularly motivated to be warm and close and intimate with that person. So sometimes what you've got to do in order to find the time is you got to deal with some stuff that's in the way. That's another one of these points that we'll get to a little bit later. But some of the resistance that we get from people besides, oh, I don't have the time, is, oh, that doesn't sound very romantic. You know, we're going to make an appointment, you know, to have some intimate time together. Well, you know what? Sometimes you do have to set aside some time. And it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual, but it can be.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have some time in your life, in your relationship, where the two of you can just be together without all the stuff that we bring, you know, all the concerns about other stuff and frustration that we have with each other and problems and all this other stuff. If you don't have some time that is totally free from that, you know, you just block that out. We're not going to deal with that. It doesn't exist for the next 2 hours. If you don't have some of that time, I promise you, your relationship is not going to work. It's like if you have a pet and you don't feed that pet, it's going to die or run away. If you don't feed your relationship, the way you feed it is by showing up and giving it quality attention. And you can do that no matter how busy you are and no matter how much other stuff is going on in your life. And even if you don't feel so great towards your partner at the time, you can still put that stuff aside. And you can feed your relationship. If you don't, it will die.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you for how nurturant you've been in the
welcome.
relationship. There was a period of time where our relationship was pretty raggedy ass. And it was because we neglected it. And we learned the hard way that you just can't do that. You have to take really good care. So this is the voice of experience here that you're talking about. We're trying to save you some trouble. The next one is to have a broad definition of what lovemaking is. Because some people get so narrowly focused, you know, they get so focused on intercourse, and they get focused on orgasm, and they get focused on penetration, and they don't think about all the foreplay and the discussion. Do you know, the context set, the emotional climate, the looking into each other's eyes, the full body touch, and that in the midst of the sexual experience, sometimes you get distracted. Sometimes an old memory comes up. Sometimes you got, religious abuse from the church that's making it bad and wrong, or some distracting things. If you can create agreement with your partner that this is all welcome, rather than just trying to power through it, rather than feeling like it's not permissible for you to be able to say, could we just pause a moment, because I've really got something coming up for me. It's not always just the women either. Sometimes the men have things that are distracting them, that are worrying them. And to be able to speak about that can be very tender. It can be a very intimate experience, and it can be a really enlivening experience. So to think broadly about what lovemaking is. One time we were teaching a class, and a woman said, I believe that foreplay is everything that went on between the last time we had sex and the next time. And I said, yes, that's true. It's the whole context of the relationship. How much kindness, how much care, how much generosity, and that we can show that we care a whole lot to the people who we single out to choose to be our lover, and that all of that counts. Do you see? That you can be making love with that person all day, every day, just in the little sweet things that you say, or the little touches, or the little, those little things. They really, really, really count.
All right, this one is about having a discrepancy in desire rates. That's when, one person thinks that making love twice a week is excessive, and the partner thinks that making love twice a day isn't enough. It's not uncommon. In fact, it's more common than not that couples each have different levels of desire rates. It's rare that both couples are very comfortable with the exact same frequency. So there's got to be some give and take. Relationships are like that. I don't know if you've noticed that, but there's got to be some reciprocity, some mutuality, some willingness on the part of both partners to accommodate, not just in sex, but with everything, because we tend to attract people who are very different from us in certain ways, in terms of personalities, temperaments. So you better get used to learning how to negotiate these things. And so the partner, in this case, the partner who prefers more sex, more frequent sex, might have to be willing to adjust things down a little bit, which will be made easier for him or her if the other person is willing to do their part and kind of press themselves into being more willing to go a little bit outside of their comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
So much of the experience of sex is up here. This is the most potent sexual organ we have, the brain. And if you're telling yourself that, this is torture, I'm just not in the mood for this, I'm just not enjoying it. Of course, you don't want to have to force yourself, but sometimes we can kind of gently encourage ourselves to practice what we call generosity of spirit, to make an effort to move towards and into the world of the other person, to make that effort. If both people are doing that, it's very resolvable.
So the next one is related to the expanded definition of lovemaking. I talked about the whole context, and then there can be a debrief, respectfully, not critically or judgmentally, to speak about what worked and what doesn't work, because there may be some things that you're longing for that we're missing, and that this is not supposed to be off the table. This is on the table, and this builds trust, that both people care about each other so much that they're willing to practice patience and generosity and risking, so that you keep refining it. There's a popular myth that single, unmarried, not in committed partnership, are having the best sex, and that's not true. It's the longer-term marrieds that are not only having more sex, but having more enjoyment in sex, because they keep refining it. Do you know, the collaboration and the communication and the caring really allows for the unfolding of what it is that lights each person up. So it takes a while to work that out. You just can't expect to fall right into it right away and have it be consistently glorious. It requires some asking for what we want and tweaking it and refining it over time. Fire bright over time.
Yeah, Linda made reference to this a little bit earlier, but I'll mention it again. It's possible to keep the sexual fire bright well into old age. It requires that you keep your body and spirit vibrant, alive, and growing throughout your life.
So I know that on college campuses all over this country, there's a whole lot of hooking up. And that people are just in it for the sexual thrill. Don't tell me anything. I don't want to know your name, and I don't want to know your history or anything about you. I don't want to know your major. Let's just fuck, and that's fine. It's got its place, do you know? But there are a whole repertoire, and when you have played that out, it might take a while till you play that out. Then to have more in-depth emotional connection with the sexual. And that is overall reported to be, I can testify, the most glorious form of sex is when you feel deeply known, when you feel safe enough to be emotionally vulnerable and let the other person see your magnificent failures and your insecurities and your fears and your greatness and your wildest dreams for your life. And when you start to reveal rather than conceal, and to express rather than repress, and when you disclose and you open up, rather than be closeted about yourself, and you really are transparent, and you're practicing. At this age, you're practicing. These partners are your lab partners. And you maybe will have a lot of them. They talk about the trying 20s. Usually they're referring to it's difficult, the transition from childhood to adulthood in the 20s. But I think of the trying 20s as you try out a whole lot of different kind of things. You try out a whole lot of different imaginings for what you're going to do for career. And you try maybe different majors and different courses. But trying out different lovers will really help you to know what it is that will position you well for a life partner. And see who you're relating to, particularly lovers, as the practice people. They may not be for a lifetime. And it's going out of vogue to even get married these days. Do you know there are more single women in the United States than married women for the first time in history? I'm here to testify that I believe in marriage. I think it's a really good thing. But I know that some people have bad associations with marriage, largely because their family of origin, maybe their parents weren't so happily married. But it is possible, very possible, even if you come from a family where they hated each other and just stuck it out, that with your commitment and your learning capacity, you can learn how to have a really beautiful relationship with somebody on a long-term basis. So we're both really strong advocates of emotional connectedness in the most deep and meaningful, vulnerable way will give rise to the best sex.
Good.
The last one's just enjoy yourself. Okay, we'll open it up to questions now.
Actually, I think it'd be a good time to take a break.
First?
Yeah.
Be thinking about what kind of questions you want to risk putting out there while you're on your break.
Well, all right, everybody. Let's come back together, please. And I do mean COME. Let's not have anybody having sex and trying to do the other.
I don't think they heard you.
LA?
Go Dodgers.
All right. Well, all right. So you've had some wonderful information to start with. Now is the time for that R word. We call it, as you know, standing in the fire. We want you to share now. We want you to have the bravery, the fortitude, the will to now put yourself out there. You've got questions. You know you do. You've got it running on your tape over and over about relationship, about how this works or how that works. And you have two of the most magnificent people in the world right here, right now, that can walk you through that answer. So I encourage you, stand up in that fire and put it out there. There is no judgment in this class. There is nothing wrong. You can't ask a wrong question. I promise you that you cannot. So let's bring them back up.
Okay. Well, at the risk of sounding like I'm discrediting everything that Joe just said, I want you all to know it's perfectly okay not to ask any questions. And if there's something there, go for it. Like I said earlier, we really like this part of it because it gives us a chance to get to know you better, gives us a chance to let you know more about who we are. You can ask personal questions, not just personal, from like your experience about maybe something that you're working with or struggling with or confused about. You can ask us personal questions. We're not opposed to, letting you know, sharing some of the things that we've learned personally over the years. So again, like I said earlier, it can be about sex. It can be about any aspect of relationships that you have any interest in learning more about. So who wants to start off? Yes, please.
What are like some key what are some key things that you should do to make a long distance relationship work?
Great question.
Ooh, yeah, there's a lot of those going on these days, isn't there? Long distance relationships. You want to speak to that?
I want to speak to it. As in any relationship, to have meaningful connection is what builds the bond. So whether, you live in the same house or you live separately or they're on the other coast, the intention to keep this relationship strong and healthy is to build that bond. I am a big time connection person. So for me, it's not excessive to have daily contact. For other people, that would be too much. And I'm talking whether they live in the house with you, live in the same community, a different town, or the other coast. You need to work out some kind of an agreement with this lover that you will Skype on a regular basis, or you'll talk on the phone, or that you'll text. And not just that you have the agreement about with frequency, because some person might be satisfied with less and the other person with more. But the depth at which you go to. A long distance relationship requires more. Do you know? Because sometimes it's just so painful missing each other and being lonely and not having enough contact that the people drift apart. So if this is a person that you really want to keep in your life, you'll need to be proactive about creating the agreement with the frequency with which you're going to speak with each other, and make the contacts that you have really count. Because sometimes you could be on different coasts or in different cities, and you could be closer than people who are living in the same house who are on cruise control. Did you want to add something to it?
No, I think that's pretty good.
Thank you for the question. Great question.
Do you
Yeah.
think like with like texting and social media and like that constant contact with like people in relationships, I know like I'm always like texting people and everything. Do you think that's like good for like a long-term relationship? Like you guys,
Mhm.
there wasn't texting when you
No.
guys were first
Didn't
together.
exist.
And there's like that mystery there of maybe not knowing, and now like constant
Yeah.
knowing of where the other person is and what they're doing. That
You
I wish
skipped it first.
more people would ask that question because.
Yeah.
Charlie, repeat the question.
Yeah, oh, okay. Yeah, what he's asking is, what is the impact, positive or negative, on texting, and could that be a problem, or how does that actually fit into a relationship? Is that kind of close
Yeah,
to what
yeah.
you were saying? I am a really big fan of technology, and I'm very appreciative for the technological advances that have been made available to us. It has allowed us to really put our words out there in a much bigger platform than we ever would have been able to. Now, having said that, I also have some concerns about the degree to which some people engage in texting, not because it's too much, but because the proportion of communications that are electronic compared to the proportion of communications that are direct and face-to-face is growing. And in other words, there's a much smaller percentage of actual personal contact than there had been. And there's a lot more technical contact. And that's a problem, because you cannot experience the same level of understanding and connection by texting that you can by communicating with somebody when you're in the same place. And it's not just because communication is more than just the exchange of information. Sometimes that's all we need to do, and just need to say, I'll meet you at Starbucks at 7:45. Okay, that's sufficient information. But when it comes to communicating more meaningful things, like Linda was saying earlier about long distance relationships, to communicating, what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, what's going on with me, what my inner life is like, it is insufficient. Words are not enough. We need to have other types of information communicated to us through eye contact, through touch sometimes, through noticing body language. When you're with somebody, the words that you're hearing represent 15% of what's actually being communicated. 85% of what's being communicated is being communicated through your other senses, viscerally, through what you can hear, what you can smell, what you can touch, what you can observe. So relationships require a certain amount of that kind of contact. And that's one of the challenges of long distance relationships, is that because there's not as much opportunity for that level of contact, there's a risk of the relationship being neglected.
Mhm.
And the same thing goes for electronic communication too. Does that address your question? Okay.
I agree
Thank
with
you.
what he's saying, and I'm really concerned that people are losing the opportunity to practice the fine art of communicating with each other, where you hear the subtleties of the tone of voice, facial expression, and body language. But I have another concern in addition to that. Sometimes one person in the pair wants a lot more connection than the other one, and there's an expectation that you should be available and respond to their text, even
Yeah.
if there's 6 in a day. And
Yeah.
it can feel to the person who's more on the private end of the spectrum, not making any judgment about the person who wants less contact and the person that wants more, but the person that's on the more private end of the spectrum can feel intruded upon, even controlled or demanded of, like you're supposed to, be as frequent in contact with them as they are with you. So it's just another challenge to negotiate for your needs if you feel like you're the person who wants more contact and the other person wants less. Are we nailing it, what your
Yeah.
concern is?
Yeah.
Good. Please, right here.
My question is, you guys talked a lot about like the give and take aspect of relationships. We're all really young, so sometimes people haven't quite met that maturity level yet of understanding that, it's not all about them. How do you communicate, like, to the person, be like, hey, like, you have to think about my emotions, feelings, kind of like that. It's not just, it's about the relationship, not about you or just me.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Great question.
I love these questions. Let me respond to that. The best form of teaching is by example. And sometimes we are, when we notice that the other person is not being particularly attentive to us or not reciprocating in terms of being considerate of some of what we might want, and they have an expectation that it's all coming to them, there's a tendency to want to withhold because it doesn't seem fair. This isn't balanced. And this is not uncommon. And it's not just with young people, believe me. What to do? Well, what not to do is to make them wrong or judge them or criticize them or shame them or say things to them that are designed to get them to feel bad or guilty so that they're going to come around and be more generous of spirit. What we try to practice and try to encourage other people to do is to give that person what you want them to give to you. That doesn't always work, because sometimes, they'll just be really happy to be getting more from you, and they won't, they're unclear on the concept. They don't get it. They don't realize it. And so then, but sometimes they do, and that's why the first thing is just continue to be generous, and if there's no response that's positive, then you got a problem. And when there's a problem in a relationship, we always encourage people to, if they can't work it out themselves by making adjustments, then they need to talk about it. They need to say, look, this is what's going on for me right now. I'm beginning to feel kind of resentful because it seems like you're always expecting me to blah, 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 and I'm not getting much back from you. And it's really getting in my way. I don't want to feel resentful towards you, but it's hard for me not to feel that when it doesn't feel like this is an even exchange here. And I'm only telling you this not because I'm, want to make you wrong. I'm telling you this because I don't want anything contaminating our relationship, including resentment that I have. And I need some help from you in order to get over this. I need to really feel like you're a partner with me and that this is more even and it's more fair. You know what I'm saying?
And if that doesn't work, you should probably just...
Well, if that doesn't work, what you get sometimes with that is you get somebody who's defensive. Well, what do you mean? Well, what about the time that I gave you this? And they'll try to find examples of, how you're wrong. They'll try to make you wrong. You shouldn't feel that way. I'm a good person. Don't, and if you continue to just try to be honest and express yourself in a considerate, caring way, without a lot of judgment on it, and they refuse to even be open to what you're saying, then I think you really got to give some thought to, is this the kind of person that I want to invest my energy and time in?
Mhm.
The thing about relationships is that you're going to go through thousands of relationships in your life, and not all of them are going to be long term. Some of them are going to last for a few minutes, and you're going to be glad when they're over. But some of them are going to last for years, and it's really important to be able to discern and to be discriminating about who I'm choosing to invest my precious life energies and time with. And it's not always obvious right away. Sometimes it takes a while, but you got to give people a chance.
Right. The related question is knowing when to hold them and when to fold them. Do you know, when it's time to leave a relationship because my needs are not really being taken into
And that could be a
consideration.
friendship or a romantic relationship or, any kind of relationship.
One of the things that we see is that people give up on relationships that have really strong potential. Do you know? Because the despair and the hopelessness in the mind when they get to a place where they're frustrated and don't feel that their needs are being met, without going that extra distance and really talking about the tough subjects and negotiating for their needs. What ends up happening if they leave prematurely before they give it their best effort is they're haunted by the if-onlys. If I had had the balls to sit down and talk with her about this and said, I'm really feeling like I'm not being seen and that my needs aren't being met and this is really important to me, and, do that negotiating, and then it still doesn't work, we can leave with our head up, and our back straight and feel like I gave it my best shot and they didn't respond. But if you practice those negotiation skills, you can get better at negotiating. You can also get better and have your feelers out for finding the people who are eligible. It sensitizes us to find somebody who's more generous of spirit the next time, that aren't the selfish takers. Because those of us who are on the real generous of spirit, service-oriented end of the spectrum, it's like the people who are more self-absorbed. They have sonar and they come right to us, and so you'll play it out again. So you might know what end of the spectrum you are, and the opposites do attract. The complements do attract. And what we found when we did this research, the anecdotal research I told you about from book 2 about the happiest couples, they're champs in both domains. Usually you find people who are good at self-care and people who are generous of spirit. But these people who are hitting the highest realms that you can of well-being and co-creative relationships, they're accomplished in both areas. And when we started out, it was one of the difficulties in our relationship because Charlie's really good, always has been, about taking good care of himself, and I've been service-oriented, and generous of spirit. So I've learned a lot from him about taking better care of myself. I like to think he's learned a great deal from me about generosity of spirit.
I haven't, no.
Yes, he's a champ now. And he's a good student, and I'm glad that he learned that, and I'm glad that I learned from him. But this is probably going to crop up in other relationships, so you're still going to need to, have your feelers out and set agreements in the beginning about wanting an egalitarian relationship where both people's needs can be respected and met. Not all the time, but generally speaking. Thank you very much for that question.
Linda, just on that, I think what I heard you say was that many potentially great relationships end because people are unaware of the tools that are available to you.
And if they had
to
those
resolve
tools,
the
they
conflict.
could have made it.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot
A
of
lot
people
of
who
relationships
said,
go
if I
down.
knew then what I have finally learned now after my second divorce, if I knew then, I know that we could have made it. And it's true. It's true. But so few of us really have had the examples to
Right.
learn from people who have co-created really healthy relationships. And that's why we're so glad that we get to be a part of this
movement towards healthy relating.
Your generation and our generation are the pioneers, for learning how to negotiate. Our parents did not have the opportunity to negotiate because the religious organizations and the family and community say you stay together even if you're in hell realms. So we're challenged to learn to negotiate well.
Okay. This lady over here with the
Green.
jacket on.
Green.
Yeah, Miss Green.
Miss Green. I was wondering, have you ever taken a break in your relationship from each other? Also, what are your just thoughts on taking a break in a relationship?
You can.
We had a long break.
A long break.
We had a break that he wanted to take, that I didn't want to take, where he got job charming when our children were small.
Job charming.
Job charming. He got the opportunity of a lifetime professionally when our kids were little, and he was flying all around the country in Canada doing his career thing. And I didn't see him for 6 days out of 7 and 3 weeks
It wasn't
out of a
like
month.
a permanent separation. It was just that I was gone a lot of the time.
I meant like separation.
Yeah, no.
It was a kind of a separation. We were still married. We were technically living together,
We have a difference of opinion.
but he was doing his career thing. So it was a break of sorts.
Yeah.
I didn't like it,
Yeah.
but it was good for me.
Yeah, she didn't like it.
I got to stand on my own 2 feet and do this single mom and,
Yeah.
make decisions and carry a lot more responsibility than I wanted to have. And I was very grateful when that break time was over.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
No,
Yeah.
she's got a different kind of break in mind.
Yeah, I was just curious about couples that.
What do we think
struggle
about
with-
having separations like that?
Yeah.
I think sometimes they can be helpful.
Yeah.
Particularly if a couple really is entrenched in a repetitive pattern, that the harder they try to work on it, the worse it gets. One of those things where we just can't even talk about this. And if they can't really make any headway, and then they bring in some help, which I always encourage people to do, give it your best shot without any help. Do what you can. If you can't do that, bring in somebody, bring in a third party, because sometimes all it takes is 1 or 2 sessions to get unstuck. But if you give it your best shot, you get help, you do everything you can do, and it still isn't working, but you don't want to terminate the relationship permanently, take a break. What's most important isn't whether or not you take the break, it's what you do during the break.
Mm-hmm.
It's whether that during that break you do the work that you need to do to become more skilled, more capable of holding your part in a responsible way in the relationship. In one of our books, we feature a couple who were married, and then their marriage broke down. They separated, they divorced, they went their separate ways. And then what they did during that time that they were divorced was they did work on themselves. They got into therapy. They did. One of them joined the guy joined a men's group, and the woman joined a women's group. They did some very deep personal inner work to become a better person, to learn more about themselves and about relating. And then one of their kids got into a car accident that was very serious, and it brought them together to visit him in the hospital. And by this time, this was like 4 years later, they had become different people because of what they had been doing with themselves. And they found themselves being attracted to each other again. And the long, the short version of the story is they ended up getting remarried 12 years ago. They're still remarried, have the best relationship they've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not encouraging people to get remarried after you divorce. This is rare. It doesn't happen. But it's an example of what's possible when people use that separation time to really do work on themselves rather than to stay, angry at the other person and to build up a case about, why they were such a jerk and how much you hate them. And I mean, it depends upon how you use the time.
And in addition to getting some good counseling and seeing what precipitated the break, why you need that separate time, another factor in addition to getting good help is if you have a monogamy agreement for that section of time. Because if it's open, you put yourself at high risk to fall in love with somebody else or get involved with somebody else. And it's not a moral dilemma, it's just a practical dilemma. That to keep one relationship in good shape is piece of work in itself. When you start having other partners, it gets really complicated in the competitiveness and the insecurities and the jealousy. That sometimes can make the separation become permanent because of the feelings of abandonment and so forth. So if you can create a temporary separation while we really take stock of where we're going and what we need and is this working for us, and you can keep the monogamy that stacks the deck for success to reconcile with some positive outcome.
Linda?
Yeah.
Charlie, talk just a little bit about holding differences. Holding differences.
Holy, H-O-L-Y, holding. Holding the differences.
Yeah.
This is part of maturing, to be able to see that they're not who I thought they were when I was in infatuation. I was kind of drugged. Do you know the endorphins and things in my blood system at that point were making me think you were an angel. And then...
What do you mean making you think?
And then, when you come out of infatuation and you're not doped up anymore, they can look demonic. And how do we ever get together? He's not who I thought he was. And I can remember the moment when it hit me and I said, oh, I didn't get the prize. And then I thought, right after that, but I'm not the prize.
Yeah, that's what I've been telling you.
And so I realized that I had been making up a lot of things that I didn't know about him at first. I had been filling the blanks with Prince Charming. And when I saw him more clearly...
Oh, when you told me, I see, because when I told you that I was Prince Charlie, you thought that I said Prince
Charming.
Oh, I see, okay. That explains it.
So I saw that he's different from what I ordered, and is different than who I thought he was. And then I'm challenged to make room for all the differences and not to freak out and say, oh my God, we're so different. We're a hopeless mismatch. How are we ever going to make it? That we just needed to create a big space. Do you know what I mean? To cultivate tolerance and acceptance, and not for the things that are unacceptable. I mean, just for different styles of being in the world. I'll give you a good example. Charlie is introverted. So where he goes when he's stressed is he needs solitude. He wants to go inside. That's how he replenishes himself. Quiet silence. Me, I'm a flaming extrovert. Anything bothered me, I want to talk about it. I'll grab a stranger off the street and talk to him if I can't get one of my friends on the phone. You know about extroversion. And so when I would get upset about something, Charlie would say, I'll give you some time to yourself to think about it. That's the last thing that I wanted. That may be what he wants, to put himself together. I wanted him to show up with some caring listening so I could talk about what was bothering me. So we had to learn about our differences and really grow a respect for them and to learn from each other, because some very deep natural knowing in us gravitates us to people who are very different than we are, because there's this inner drive for mastery, for us to grow and to become bigger human beings. So we're going to be attracted to people who aren't just like us. Thank you for the question.
You're very, very welcome. I just wanted him to know that not all conflicts Not all your conflicts are gonna get resolved, even though you have a box
That's
full of
right.
tools. And you talk and you speak your truth, you enter into it and say, look, this is not your fault, I'm not making you wrong, it's bugging me.
Yep.
But even after you do all those things, it may still be there. So what decision do you have to make then? Either you're gonna give the relationship up, or you're gonna hold that difference and say, okay, that's the way that that person is. And I can live with it and be happy with it. Well, not happy with it, but happy with our whole relationship, regardless of this part.
Make room for it.
Yeah.
That's really a great example, Joe. In our most recent book, one of the chapters has to do with how it's okay to have irreconcilable differences. That it's not only okay, but it's inevitable. You wouldn't even be attracted to somebody who was just like you. There wouldn't be any chemistry there. The chemistry comes from two opposite poles interacting with each other. Two poles that are aligned with each other repel each other. So you wouldn't, it's inevitable. Get used to it. You're going to be dealing with it.
Thank you. Question right here in pink.
I was just gonna ask your opinion of your significant other moving in with somebody of the opposite gender that they're really close to, regardless, like if they're in a relationship or not. Like how to deal with that being on the other side.
Do you want to speak to it?
What?
Do you want to speak to it? Go for it.
So you're talking about a situation where there's a relationship that you're having with somebody, and that person moves in with another person as a roommate.
Opposite gender.
Yeah, yeah. Tricky, very tricky. And I'm not saying it couldn't work, but I would say that there would have to be a foundation of a deep level of honesty and trust that had already been established in the relationship, so that because I think it would be almost impossible for the other person who was in the relationship that the partner didn't move in with, the other person to not have some concerns about that. It seems like it could be a real setup for some serious conflict there.
And it might be workable, but I would recommend that you get to know her. Make sure that she knows that you're a living, breathing entity that has feelings for this guy, and that you want to keep the trust between you and your guy really strong, and that they need to stay on the platonic end of the boundary.
Yeah, what I would say is that if a person does need to move into a roommate situation, it's much less potentially damaging if it's with somebody where there isn't any likelihood or possibility of serious physical attraction.
And sometimes in a little lesser threatening situation than your guy living with a woman roommate is just your guy having female friends or your gal having male friends. And some people don't have any tolerance for that, And I think when the trust is strong enough and your guy can have female friends, he can learn a lot about women, which is going to benefit the relationship. And if the guy can be okay on his woman having guy friends, she can learn a lot about men that can end up enhancing the relationship. But you have to keep the boundaries really clear. Thank you for the question. Right here, and then I'm coming into the back row.
So as people, we all crave our own independence in a way, but yet in a relationship you're codependent. How can you keep up that sort of independence? Like, for instance, my partner and I, if one of us wants to do something, and usually if it's on my end, she'll want to come with me. If it's just something that I want to do myself, how would I safely, not safely, but politely address that I just kind of want to be on my own?
Great question. It's typical, particularly in the early part of the relationship, for a couple to get joined in the hip, do you know, and to do everything together. And in the early stage, in that infatuation stage, people cocoon and they just, like, the whole rest of the world falls away, and sometimes your friends are really angry with you because you're neglecting them. And when you come out of the infatuation and you want to individuate more, we call that the dance of love and freedom. You come together and you're close, and then you let go and you're two unique individuals. And really successful relationships do that well. And so you have to negotiate for your needs and tell her how much you care for her and how much you enjoy her and the things that you're going to do together. But I really want to do some things by myself. And I hope that you won't take it personally. This isn't in any way against you. It's just for my well-being. I need to go be with the guys. Do you know, I need to go be by myself. We suffered a lot with this because I took it so personally when Charlie needed his solitude. And I thought, he's bored with me. He thinks I'm a pest. He thinks I'm needy. Do you know? He thinks I'm suffocating him. And I made such a big, huge deal out of it. And it was a while until he just said, you know, I'm an introvert. I like to spend time by myself. It doesn't even have anything to do with you. So if you can tell her, you tell your partner, I love doing things with you, but I really like doing things by myself and with the guys. There's ways you can do it with so much tact and care that it would reassure them.
One of the questions that we get a lot from people is, I don't understand why relationships take so much work.
Hard.
Why are they so hard? Why are they so complicated? I mean, it seems like we're naturally designed to be loving people. Why doesn't it come easier? And you know, I thought about that a lot, and I think that one of the main reasons that relationships can be very challenging is because they require us to be two opposite ways simultaneously that seem mutually exclusive. Seems like it's got to be one or the other, but we have to be both. We have to be both self-referential, which means I've got to be really attuned to my own experience and responsible for providing for my own needs. And at the same time, I have to be able to become aware and responsive to the needs and feelings and concerns of my partner. In other words, I've got to be able to give my committed attention and responsibility to myself and to my partner at the same time. Because if I overdo it one way or the other, it ain't going to work. So it's a piece of work to learn how to do that. And so many of us are very sensitive to being rejected. So when I'm taking care of myself and my attention isn't on my partner, you know, she might feel neglected or hurt or uncared for, or start wondering why she's not getting from me what she wants. And when I'm giving too much of my attention to my partner and neglecting myself in order to keep her from, or him from feeling insecure or doing what I think I need to do, but I'm overdoing it, then what am I going to be experiencing? What am I likely to be experiencing if I'm overdoing it in the opposite direction? Anybody here ever done that? Overgiven? So what is it that you feel when you're doing too much of that?
Resentful?
You start feeling resentful. It's inevitable. You can't help it. You can't help it because it feels like, you know, they are taking something from you. The truth is they're not. You're giving it, but you're giving it maybe for the wrong reasons. Maybe you're giving it out of fear of what they might do or say or feel or think if you don't. Maybe you're giving it because you're afraid not to give it, or maybe you're doing it in order to get them to manipulate them in some way. But when we're overdoing it in one way or the other, we're going to get feedback either from that person
or from our own body that says this is not okay. Need to put in a correction here.
I promised the person in the back row, but I saw you.
What's the major problem you have encountered in couples? And if there is, I mean, what's the solution you have given for them?
So the question is, what is the major problem that you encounter with couples? One of the things that we see a lot of over the years in marriage counseling is people who are dealing with differences unskillfully. Do you know that we are attracted to somebody who's very different than we are? That same compelling magnetic force that has us pick them out, do you know, of the thousands of options that are available? We pick them, and then some of the same things that magnetize to them drive us nuts after the infatuation wears off. And people don't know how to negotiate the differences. They don't know how to make room for it all, the intensity of feeling. And when people get frightened and when people get hurt, they sometimes get gnarly, you know, that they snap and they threaten and they bite and they, you know, do all kind of rejecting things, walk away, I'm not going to talk about it, that's just how I am, and, you know, that they act out. And so we find that a lot, that people don't know how to deal with differences well and get vulnerable with each other and speak about how frightened they are and how much pain they're in, and that this is touching some really old pain from my family of origin. We see that a lot. Do you know that you just touch it lightly and then they're very reactive because they've got wounds there. And part of what we're doing together in romantic partnership is to have a corrective experience to get over some of the traumas from our childhood. So there are usually two basic fears that people have. It's the fear of being controlled and fear of being abandoned. And usually people who have one of those fears, you don't usually get people who are dominated by fear of abandonment together or fear of control together. You get the opposites attracting. And so when people have their fears activated, they act out until they learn how to handle that fear skillfully without, you know, being a stress case. So we see that a lot, and we also see people who give their relationship starvation rations. Do you know what I mean by that? That they give their careers, do you know, a lot. They work for the church, they work for the political candidate, and they expect the relationship to take care of itself, and they don't devote enough time and attention to keeping it healthy and thriving. So sometimes it's on the abuse end where they're, you know, nasty to each other and argumentative and judgmental and critical and not willing to get vulnerable. And sometimes it's just sheer neglect that people underestimate how much time and attention and care and love and devotion a relationship requires to really thrive. Thank you very much for the question. Here.
I think you pretty much
Answered it. Please.
My question is for, like, if you're in a serious relationship and there's been like a violation of trust and it's been addressed and like owned up to, and the person who violated the trust is like making a very clear effort to like regain that trust, but the other person is still feeling a little bit closed off, like how can that be addressed?
Good one.
Well, first of all, repairing broken trust takes time.
Yeah.
And it often takes more time than we think it should. And just because one person sincerely expresses remorse and apologizes for the transgression, that doesn't mean the other person is going to be ready to accept that apology yet. So sometimes it just takes more time. I mean, we keep referring to these examples in our books because I think that they really, we're not, you know, we just want to illustrate some of the points. But I'm thinking of another example where a couple had
had a breakdown in the relationship in which he had an affair with a woman who was a very close friend of his wife. It was a bad scene, and she was enraged, and I mean murderous rage, and he apologized. He expressed remorse, and it took her a while, quite a while, to get over it. We're talking about many, many months to even begin to soften. And he said to her a number of times, he said, I know how you feel, I understand that it's hard for you to trust that I'm never going to do this again, but I know that I'm not going to, and I trust myself, and I will be with you and take as much time, give you as much time as you need to come to the point where you trust me as much as I trust me. Mm-hmm. And just him saying those words really helped her to feel some relief. And she did come around, and they ultimately ended up having a much deeper level of trust afterwards than they did before the breakdown. And we call that an example of how couples often can get what we call stronger at the broken places. The breakdowns happen, and if you are willing to work with them, I mean, sometimes you can't, because the other person says, I'm done. Mm-hmm. I'm never going to forgive you. You blew it. You went too far. It's over. Okay, I mean, that happens a lot, and where people that are just so caught up in the pain and the anger and the fury of having been betrayed, and it could be any kind of betrayal, not just talking about infidelity, but where the feelings are so strong that they impulsively end the relationship, and then they don't want to go back on it because they feel like, no, I made my decision and that's it. So we really encourage people, when there is something like that, not to be too quick to make a decision about the future. You know, even though you feel like right now, you can't imagine continuing with this, maybe not, but give it some time, because in almost every single situation over time, if you just, the feelings of that level of rage do diminish, and then you can think more clearly about it. But if you make a decision in the moment of that kind of anger, it's likely to be something that you'll regret.
I want to just add, there are a couple of sweet little details of this healing story after this terrible betrayal that just about tore them apart. Not only was he proactive in demonstrating his trustworthiness to her by saying, whenever you have those fears come up that I'm going to betray you again, I want you to tell me, and I want to comfort you. And she agreed to do that, and then he would hold her and say, I learned my lesson with this isn't going to repeat. But she was also doing her work.
Yeah.
Because there was a part of her mind was so inflamed that she was in the indignant, righteous victim about it. Do you know? That there was a part of her that didn't want to let go, that was too fearful to trust him again. And she had to work with herself, not to have her inflamed mind dominate her, and to choose to trust and forgive. So they both had to work it from their sides.
Yeah.
That's a really good question.
Does that
you.
help answer your question?
Good.
I know a lot of times, like in a serious relationship, when stress comes about, and each individual's life, they will sometimes take out that stress on the other person. Like, sometimes you take out your anger, your stress on the person who's to you. And how would you, I guess, like prevent that, or like how do you prevent that, and how do you deal with that?
Good question. You want to speak to it
No,
first?
you continue.
So, the best thing is to head the trouble off at the pass if you can. To keep ourselves out of being stress case where we got a short fuse and we say things we're sorry for or do things we're sorry for or neglect the relationship. That's always the ideal. And sometimes life gives us, trouble and we're stressed. And we can't stop those waves from coming, but we can learn to surf. Do you understand what I'm saying? That we can learn to surf them? Because we can get good at repair. We can't, keep the breakdowns from happening, but we can get to be champion repair people where we get in there and take responsibility right away. Whoa, that really came out wrong. I know I had tone in my voice. Could we do a do-over? One of the couples that we interviewed for our second book, The Secrets of Great Marriages, they have a clapboard. Do you know like they use when they do TV takes and movie takes? Take two. And that if you have agreement with somebody, that if you say something and you've got tone in your voice or you do something that's not skillful in the relationship, that you have a chance to improve and do a do-over. And to do it as soon as you can. Not to let trouble lay around and fester and ferment and, get infected. Because that's what we see. Somebody had a question a little bit ago about people, what takes relationships down? Would we see trouble? They think they are overlooked this. It's just a little thing. Oh, I can let it go. But they don't really let it go. It's still sticking in their throat. And then another little thing and another little thing. And most people don't break up about a big dramatic, breach of trust like an infidelity, or broken agreement or some pack of lies. There's the little things that add up. So getting good at repair. Because we are going to be overtired, sometimes preoccupied, stressed, hungry, sleep deprived or something, and we're going to make some mistakes. That's just how life is. We try to prevent those, we try to keep ourselves as centered and grounded as we can so that we are graceful and dignified, and then when we lose it, we're good repairs. Thank you for the question.
So how do you communicate that you're giving everything you have to the relationship, but the relationship is just insanely high maintenance to a point where it's like you can't do your own work, it's taking in, I can't spend time with my family, I'm getting worse grades, because of it. I mean, how do you communicate that?
I like your use of the phrase high maintenance because that characterizes a lot of situations, and generally what that is referring to is a situation in which one person is holding the other person responsible for meeting their needs. You're responsible for maintaining me. That's what the maintenance is about. And that is exhausting. Doesn't work. You
Bad
can do
deal.
Yeah,
It's a
you
bad
can
deal.
do it for a while, but there's no human on the planet that can carry that responsibility indefinitely without breaking down themselves. So what's important is to identify, first of all, to recognize my own experience that I'm getting burned out. I'm neglecting all these parts of my life because you're on the phone 12 times a day calling me, asking me for my help and my support for this and that, and it's like I need a break here. So to know within yourself, okay, this is way out of balance for me. This isn't working. To acknowledge that, and then to have a conversation with your partner about your experience, which is really different than what a lot of people do. They start critiquing the other person, saying, you're too needy. You should stop doing this. You need to take better care of yourself. Or giving them all kinds of advice doesn't help. Believe me, that doesn't help. But what you have to do is you have to let that person know, look, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what's not working for me. This is what I need. I'm not telling you that it's your fault. I'm not telling you that you need to do it. I'm just telling you this is where I am. And one of the things I need for you to know that, because this relationship is not working for me the way it is. I don't know if it can work. I hope it can, but this is what I'm going to need from you. which is really different from telling them what's wrong with them and what they need to do. This is what would help me, and then to give them some very specific feedback about what you need in order for things to work. And then check out what their response is to it. Because their response is going to tell you everything you need to know about whether we're going to be able to go forward from here or whether we're not.
Now, this is a cautionary tale here, because there are people in this room who have had friends who actually dropped out of university and gave up their dream of having their degree because they had such a troublesome romantic partnership that became so consuming and preoccupying that they couldn't sleep and couldn't get to class, and they were stress cases. And it's a shame when that happens, because completing university positions you well to have a successful career and career options and a really good life and better relationships too. Do you know that you're less at risk to have a broken family and to lose your marriage if you're college educated? So to get really crisp and clear about our boundaries, this is what you can count on me for, and this is over the top. I have to see my family. I have to have time to myself. I need to go to class, and I need to do my studies. And we are all challenged. We are all challenged to get good practiced setting boundaries. Not in a harsh way, just clear and firm.
I noticed that everything that Linda just said about this is what I need. It's all about this is me. I'm not blaming you. I'm not putting this on you. I'm just saying this is what I need, and I need to take responsibility for seeing to it that my life is structured in a way that allows me to have the inner resources, time, and energy to take care of myself as well as to maintain my relationships. And the next step after that, and this is a really important one, is to take a look at what made me so attracted to a person who I knew from the beginning was really dependent upon me. What is it about that I found attractive? Because if I don't check that out and learn something from that, guess what's going to happen next time around? Same thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have a question myself that I would like to put out, because I've been pondering this a lot. I'm seeing the statistics about how the marriage rates every year are going down, down, down. So obviously the people who are getting to marriageable age, like all of you, are having some attitudes about marriage that are different than my generation or even 5 or 10 years ago. Could some people share with me about what it is that marriage is getting such a bad reputation these days? Please?
I mean, we see so many people have divorces, so we don't, I mean, personally, I'm not speaking for everyone, but I don't feel a rush to get married, because I mean, I may love the person I'm with right now and see myself in the future with them, but I don't, from right now to when I'm 30, I don't know how much is gonna change. I don't feel a rush to do that commitment now with
Good.
that person.
I think it's important not to rush. I believe in the trying 20s. Yeah, by late 20s and 30s, I think we know more about who we are and where we're going, and are more likely to make a life partner choice that's going to last. In the back row there?
The fact that marriage was established as a system when humans only lived up to 40, 30 years old. Now that we're living up to 80, 90, we're dealing with each other more than previous humans have. And
It's a long time.
To maintain a system that's a little outdated.
Outdated.
Good point.
Thank you for that. Way back.
I mean, the way that I've always seen it is it's a little bit of a title. And also, my aunt and uncle have been together for almost 30 years, and they're not married, they just are together for a long period of time. And I sort of see it as like, if you want to be in a committed relationship for that long, that's totally fine. It just doesn't, if it's something that you want to make official, you can. If it's not, that's good too.
Thank you. Please, in pink.
I was just gonna say, my family has a really low divorce rate. Only a couple of my cousins have ever been divorced, but all my aunts and uncles and everything have been married for like 30 years or more. But I see like some of my friends that have gotten married and gone through really bad divorces, or they're just kind of like, okay, well, I'm done, like, we're getting a divorce, and they just like don't talk to them, don't communicate. It's just kind of like a breakup, but with
Yeah.
paperwork. Is how I feel that it's turned into be, instead of like something more serious where it's like you actually want to be with the person, so you sign a contract kind of thing. And so I feel like that's kind of affected like the way that people look at it.
So are you saying that you're seeing the pain of the breakups rather than seeing happy couples delighting in their marriages?
Yeah, and just people who like don't like communicate and are just kind of like, I'm done, and like don't really, like I know a couple of my friends who've been divorced, they're just like their partner was kind of like, okay, well I want to date other people, so we're gonna get a divorce, and it's kind of like, what?
So there's a sort of a casual attitude about getting married, that they're
That's
not
right.
fully committed when they do it.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I think part of it, like how you said, like religion has a lot to do with like our like sexuality and who we are. I think more recently it's becoming more socially acceptable to be a divorcee, where like say in the 1950s, if you're divorced, I know one of my friends just randomly came up that his grandpa got excommunicated from the church because he got divorced.
Yeah.
You know, like now that's becoming more socially acceptable. People aren't just like sitting together. It's like I don't want to like be ostracized from my entire community, so I'm gonna stay with this person. Now it's just like I can't be with this person anymore. I won't be ostracized from this community.
Yeah.
There is a lot more permission, which is
Yeah.
good
Social penalties on this.
for the people who are really mismatched and miserable, that they can get out, they're not trapped. Yeah, so we'll take one more.
This just kind of led me into an idea that I've been having. I wouldn't mind actually being proposed to and being engaged for a few years before I even got married. Like I would love to have the idea that we want to be together and that he showed me, or I showed him that this, like I choose you, but actually try it out for like 4 years, you know, and see.
Learner's permit.
I think that's great. Like I promise, you know, it's almost like a promise ring, but then you can maybe within that 4 years be like, wow, this isn't working, and you don't have that huge commitment of paperwork to deal with, and it doesn't create this tension and anger, and I don't know, I think that would be pretty cool.
Lots of practice.
Trial and error.
Good idea. Yes.
I know that like it varies like upon generations, especially about like moving in together before marriage, and like I battle with whether that's like a good or a bad thing all the time. And like, yeah, I understand like from my parents' perspective, they say like, oh, as soon as you move in with them, then you kind of just like accepted that like that, you know, you're gonna be with them, and like there was no rush to get married, and you want them to make a commitment to you. Then I also think, well, you should try out living together because it's a big deal to live together, and a lot of things can change. So would you want to try that out before getting married, or is it better to like get married and deal with like what comes along with living together and have that commitment or not?
I appreciate your giving me some points of view about this. It's been a little bit mysterious for me, and I feel like I want to go on the record that marriage is the best thing that ever happened to me. I've been challenged back in the day. We've been having a golden age for a good long time, but even with the difficulties that I had to go through, I grew so much. I got so much bigger. So I'm a believer in marriage, about sealing the container and making the declaration to family and community and legally and all like that. And I'm concerned about the trend. So thank you for indulging me and listening to me about how I favor it. And I respect everybody's choice. Everybody has to come to their own conclusion. This is too big a decision, too important a decision in life to make with anybody else's values. You have to get clear yourself what is going to really work for you. We should probably wrap up. Any other closing remarks?
Yeah, just before we finish up, I just wanted to say one thing about my thoughts on marriage, which are a little different from Linda's. And that is that I'm not a believer in marriage. But I know. But I am a believer
in the power of human beings, and the power of love, and the power of intentionality, and the power of commitment. And marriage itself does not do anything for anybody. But what it does do is provide a context within which it is possible to become and support another person and be supported by another person to become a more loving human being. And that I'm a believer in. So I do believe that marriage can provide that, but I don't see that itself, it's like energy. Energy can be used in any number of ways. It can be used destructively or constructively. It is just a means to an end. Marriage is a potential means to an end that can not only fulfill both individuals in it, but can fulfill every person that is touched by that relationship and every person that comes out of that relationship.
So
Let me just say.
finish.
Just finish.
I gotta have a closing remark.
I know you do.
myself.
Yeah, so I want to thank you all for being such great participants here. Those of you, because I really feel your presence, the word that came up earlier, and I really experience your attention, and that really makes a big difference for me. We have spoken to groups who aren't quite as engaged as your group has been, and believe me, some of you know this, it's different. It's different, and it really feels good to have you here really with us. So thank you for that.
So I want to thank you also, and I'm a believer in respect for differences. So the fact that we have different takes on marriage is fine with me. And really, we have worked with many couples who have been married who haven't been as committed as couples who were not.
That's right.
So the bottom line really is the fierce commitment to work with what comes up, to make the good negotiated contracts, to bring out the best in each other, to be believing eyes in each other, to find out what our partner wants and to help them to get it, and to allow ourselves to be supported at that level. So I too want to thank you for your rapt attention today. I had a great time. I'm so glad that I could be here with you. And especially thank you for your juicy questions. They were great questions. And thank you for helping me to understand where the young people are today about marriage, because I really do want to understand this deeply.
Thank you.
Okay.